No, the closing of the government did not make the Epstein cover-up scandal, the child sex trafficking involvement with Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein just magically go away. In fact, if anything, the reopening of the doors of Congress have reignited the scandal, and Donald Trump and his MAGA administration are in overtime trying to cover it up. In the last 36 to 48 hours, we've had a lot of new reporting, all terrible for Donald Trump. We've got 3 new emails that have come out. We've got Michael Wolff, the journalist, who was involved in one of the 3 emails, who's come out on Legal AF and given an interview about the context of the Epstein emails that are now swirling back around Donald Trump, putting a lie to everything that Donald Trump ever said about his involvement with Jeffrey Epstein and with girls. And then he's got his administration and his chief propagandist in the form of Carolyn Levitt, thinking that by outing the redacted name to protect the confidentiality of a victim of the child sex trafficking ring, that this somehow exonerates her client, Donald Trump, who's mentioned in the email by Jeffrey Epstein writing to Ghislaine Maxwell when they were flies on the wall and they didn't think anybody was ever going to see these emails back in 2011 about Donald Trump spending hours inside of Jeffrey Epstein's house with a victim. And the fact that they identify and they try to identify and they try to pin the blame on the victim and name her and shame her does not help the administration. And then we've got Michael Wolff, who's come forward to say, I know the context in which I wrote an email to Jeffrey Epstein referencing Donald Trump, showing the leverage that Jeffrey Epstein had over Donald Trump, which is one of the reasons that these files have stayed hidden for so long. And we bring it all together, including new reporting by David Schuster, that the MAGA right-wing representatives in the House have been briefed by the Department of Justice, and that they have been told by the Department of Justice, led by Pam Bondi, that the Epstein files are worse for Donald Trump than we first suspected. As new social media post by J.D. Vance, the vice president, have surfaced, in which he reminds us all why the Epstein scandal and its ties to the rich and powerful, including up to Donald Trump, matters. Thank you, J.D. Vance, for that. I tie it all together here on the MeidasTouch Network and on Legal AF. So government was closed and shut for many reasons. One major reason was to stop the Epstein scandal from swallowing up the Trump administration. How did that work? Not well. As soon as the government reopened, the scandal landed back at the doorstep of Donald Trump and his White House. We've got the release by the Oversight Committee now that they're back. And this is bipartisan, including some MAGA on there, who released 3 emails. We posted them on Legal AF Substack. All these emails were written by Jeffrey Epstein, either to Ghislaine Maxwell or to Michael Wolff, the journalist. In particular, we have the email, and I'm going to read it to you again, which we, of course, we posted. This is to Jeffrey Epstein, from Jeffrey Epstein to Ghislaine Maxwell. I want you to realize that the dog that hasn't barked is Trump. Blank, victim's name blacked out. Thank you, Carolyn Levitt. Spent hours at my house with him. He has never once been mentioned. Police chief, etc. I'm 75% there. Showed you the leverage, the hostage negotiations, the extortion that Jeffrey Epstein was willing to go to, the levels he was willing to go to about even blackmailing Donald Trump, but with this fact about a girl, a victim, hours with Donald Trump in his house. Donald Trump's denied ever being in the house. Donald Trump's denied ever being around Jeffrey Epstein in that way, and we know that's now untrue. And the way that they thought they were going to defend themselves on this, catch this. Carolyn Levitt looked a member of the press in the eye and said, we know who that person is. And she's exonerated the president. So you're okay, Carolyn? You're a mother of children. You're okay with the not president of the United States guy named Donald Trump spending hours inside of Epstein's home with a girl? Let's play Carolyn Levitt.
Did the president ever spend hours at Jeffrey Epstein's house with a victim?
These emails prove absolutely nothing other than the fact that President Trump did nothing wrong. And what President Trump has always said is that he was from Palm Beach, and so was Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein was a member at Mar-a-Lago until President Trump kicked him out because Jeffrey Epstein was a pedophile and he was a creep. And this email you refer to with the name of a victim that was unredacted now and has since been reported on in this room, so I will go ahead and say it, Virginia Giuffre. And it was CBS's own reporting, Ouija, that recently wrote that Miss Giuffre maintained, and God rest her soul, that she maintained that there was nothing inappropriate she ever witnessed, that President Trump was always extremely professional and friendly to her. And so I think it's a question worth asking the Democrat Party, and you should all go ask them after this briefing, of why they chose to redact that name of a victim who has already publicly made statements about her relationship with Jeffrey Epstein and is unfortunately no longer with us.
Now, there's another email that's come out that's gotten a lot of attention involving Michael Wolff, the journalist. Fortunately, we've had Michael Wolff actually tell his own story, his own version of what he meant by this. But again, this email I'm going to read to you just shows the level of blackmail that Epstein, the goods that he had on Donald Trump. Here's the email that's getting a lot of press. Then we'll go right to Michael Wolff, who's been interviewed on Legal AF. December 15, 2015. I hear CNN planning to ask Trump tonight about his relationship with you, either on the air or in the scrum afterwards. Jeffrey Epstein says to the reporter, the journalist, Michael Wolff, who's already testified, has already said in his interviews that he saw pictures of Donald Trump with young girls on his lap. When the girls got off, there were stains on Donald Trump's pants. That he saw other pictures like that as well. That he knows that Donald Trump was in the house, that he knows he was on the plane. When Jeffrey Epstein says, how would you craft an answer for him? What do you think it should be? And Michael Wolff writes back, I think you should let him hang himself. If he says, meaning Trump, that he hasn't been on the plane or in the house, then that gives you valuable PR and political currency. That's really extortive capital. You can hang him in a way that potentially generates a positive benefit for you. Or if it really looks like he could win the presidency, you could save him, generating a debt. That's called blackmail. That's called extortion. Of course, it is possible that when asked, he'll say Jeffrey is a great guy and has gotten a raw deal and is a victim of political correctness, which is to be outlawed in the Trump regime. Now, Michael Wolff has come forward in the last 24 hours and issued his own statement on Instagram right before he was interviewed by Cindy Blumenthal on Legal AF. Let's play the Instagram segment of Michael Wolff on this particular email to put it in context.
This morning, the House Oversight Committee released emails directly linking Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein. And in fact, some of those emails are between Epstein and me, with Epstein discussing his relationship with Donald Trump. I have been trying to talk about this story for a very long time now. And this is, well, perhaps we're getting close to the smoking gun. These two men, Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump, had the closest of relationships for more than a decade. They shared everything. They shared their airplanes. They shared women between them. They shared constantly business and financial advice. You know, it's curious that Epstein's relationship with so many people in public life has damaged them considerably. But the one person who he was closest to has not been held accountable.
Now, Michael Wolff was asked about all of these emails, including one in which it at least suggests that Donald Trump knew that Ghislaine Maxwell was using Mar-a-Lago as a predator hunting ground to collect girls, prey on girls, and bring them back to Jeffrey Epstein. And he was asked about that with my colleague, Cindy Blumenthal, on Legal AF Court of History in the last 24 hours. And here's the clip.
Let's talk about your emails first.
My world famous emails.
Yeah, they certainly are the subject of much sensation. So in one of them, in January 2019, Jeffrey Epstein writes you, and he says about Trump, of course he knew about the girls, as he asked Ghislaine to stop. So what did he know about the girls, and why does he want Ghislaine to stop, and stop what exactly?
You know, I can't remember what the Ghislaine reference there is. Although I just got it. Sitting here, I just got it. Okay, so at that point, Ghislaine is pursuing a lawsuit, stupidly, actually, pursuing a lawsuit with Virginia Giuffre. And that is, and I'm literally just at this moment do I remember that. And that has not worked out well for Ghislaine, because I think, as I recall, Virginia Giuffre countersued, and there's lots of depositions, and Ghislaine will have to testify, and that will mean that she will have to testify about all of this, including about quite possibly about Trump. So that's what that's about. As for him knowing about the girls, that's a direct reference to what Trump knew about what was going on at Jeffrey Epstein's house. And it goes back to a couple of things. I've talked here before about the photographs that I've seen of Trump and around Epstein's pool with a set of the girls who were often at Epstein's house. But then there was also Epstein's view that it was Trump who first alerted the police to what was going on, the Palm Beach police, to what was going on at Epstein's house.
Now, there's a lot of diversionary tactics being used by the Trump administration. You saw part of it with Carolyn Leavitt. But we put the question to him. Sidney Blumenthal put the question to him. What is this email all about? This power that Epstein seems to have over Donald Trump, and how you're talking to him about it. Let's play that clip now of the interview on Legal AF in the last 24 hours.
There's a lot to unpack in what you just said, but let's go to the next email first. This email is from December 2015. And Trump has announced he's running for president in 2016. And you explained to Jeffrey Epstein that CNN is likely to ask Trump about his relationship with him. And Epstein asks you what you thought Trump would answer. And you reply, and I'm going to quote you, "I think you should let him hang himself. If he says he hasn't been on the plane or to the house, you can hang him in a way that potentially generates a positive benefit for you. Or if it looks like you could win, you could save him generating a debt." Now, let me comment first and then let you comment. This advice turns out to be remarkably prescient and deeply ironic. It turns out that Trump did lie. You assumed he would lie, and Epstein assumed he would lie. And when he was eventually asked about his relationship with Epstein, and of course it's ironic because Epstein, as we know, hanged himself, and Trump is hanging himself by lying.
Now, things have only gotten worse. We've already said that David Schuster's done a report that the MAGA, especially Massey, Mace, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and Lauren Boebert were briefed already. And we're told that the Trump files are worse for Trump than you could even imagine. That hasn't stopped Boebert from joining with Mace and Marjorie Taylor Greene and others to say that she's going to support the survivors of this scandal no matter where it leads. And then Donald Trump decided it was a good look. It was good optics for him to abuse, at least politically, women who were in the House who say they were sexually abused in their own lives, like Nancy Mace and Marjorie Taylor Greene, and I think Lauren Boebert. So he's abusing women to get to arm twist them so that they don't support female survivors of a child sex trafficking ring that he continues to cover up. And he drags Lauren Boebert into the Situation Room. It's a situation, I would say, where she is surrounded by the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, who should be ashamed of herself for many, many reasons, Kash Patel of the FBI and others, try to get browbeaten into taking her name and not support the petition. And then when questioned about that, Carolyn Levitt says that shows transparency. The fact that we're hiding the documents and trying to force these full, complete Epstein files to be continued to be in the shadows. And I'm not going to tell you what happened in the Situation Room is an example of complete transparency. Only in the upside down world that Carolyn Levitt operates in as the chief propagandist for the Trump administration. Let's play that Carolyn Levitt clip.
Why not just go ahead, release the full files on Epstein, get this all over with?
This administration has done more with respect to transparency when it comes to Jeffrey Epstein than any administration ever. It is not a coincidence that the Democrats leaked these emails to the fake news this morning ahead of Republicans reopening the government. This is another distraction campaign by the Democrat and the liberal media, and it's why I'm being asked questions about Epstein instead of the government reopening because of Republicans and President Trump.
But given your interest in transparency, Caroline, why are White House officials then meeting with Representative Boebert in an effort to try and get her to not sign this petition calling for the release of the files?
Doesn't it show transparency that members of the Trump administration are willing to brief members of Congress whenever they please? Doesn't that show our level of transparency? Doesn't that show the level of transparency when we are willing to sit down with members of Congress and address their concerns? That's a defining factor of transparency. Having discussions with members of Congress about various issues, and I'm not going to detail conversations that took place in the Situation Room in the press briefing room. Reagan.
Now, in the last 48 hours as well, J.D. Vance's tech, remember him, the vice president? He's keeping a low profile these days, isn't he? Did absolutely nothing, zero, to help reopen the government and stop and start feeding hungry Americans. Zero. This is a guy who said he grew up poor in Appalachia, right? He wrote Hillbilly Elegy. He should have a certain amount of sympathy or empathy for people who were below the poverty line, since apparently he claims he was, unless that was a complete work of fiction, and he liked to recant it all, which could possibly be true. Very silent, you know? Kamala Harris used to get a lot of grief. What is she doing? What is she working on? What is J.D. Vance working on? But here is an old tweet that's come back to bite J.D. Vance, the administration, in the backside, that's been released by and found by Andrew Kaczynski of CNN. And listen to the second one. This is J.D. Vance in 2021. Remember when we learned that our wealthiest and most powerful people were connected to a guy who ran a literal child sex trafficking ring, Vance wrote? And then that guy died mysteriously in jail, and now we just don't talk about it. Wealthiest and most powerful people. Who fits that bill? I think it's your boss, don't you think? So when you put this all together, including Michael Wolff now coming out and saying, I told you so. I told you about the interaction and intersection of Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump that he's been trying to run away from and trying to rewrite history. But these emails and texts back from the grave are blowing up in Donald Trump's face. We have shined the light on this issue. Ben Meiselas has done a yeoman's work. Video after video, Legal AF has picked it up as well, to support survivors of sex abuse, the Epstein survivors in particular, in every way, shape, and form. We will always do that. We will always stand up for the underdogs, for those who have been abused, who have been raped, who have been sexually assaulted, especially by those in power, because they're in power. And we'll do it here on MeidasTouch Network and on Legal AF. So until my next report, I'm Michael Popak. Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.